Once upon a mundane morning, Barb's day got busy without warning. A realtor in need of an open house sign. No, 50 of them, and designed before 9.
My head hurts.
Any mighty tools to help with this plight? Aha! Barb made her move. She opened Canva and got in the groove.
Bulk creating Canva sheets. Create 50 signs fit for suburban streets.
Done in a click, all complete.
Sweet!
Now, imagine what your dreams can become when you put imagination to work at canva.com.
Everyone, and welcome to How Are the Podcast. It's Gav, and you join us for a news pod. We've not done one of these in a couple of weeks because Sunderland won at Wembley, in case you missed it. So we thought we'd get caught up on everything going on in the world of Sunderland this lovely Saturday morning, because we did promise you a pod a day, and we're here to chat all about transfers, ins and outs, other bits going on, kits and international duty, and yeah, there is more than just Wembley to talk about, apparently. Anyways, first up, joining me, I've got Bomber with us. Hello, mate.
Good morning. How you doing?
Very good, mate. Pod Hawley, Johnny Hawley's here. I'm never going to give up on that intro, mate.
Aye, and you're never going to get rid of us either.
No. Also here is Chris Wynn. Hello, mate.
Hi, mate. It's been a quiet week, isn't it? Now to talk about.
No at all. I don't know what you're on about. Anyways, we will launch straight into transfers, I think, because there's a few bits and pieces going on. The big one in terms of incomings, I would say, is probably Jordan Henderson. He's been linked with a move to Sunderland this week repeatedly. I think it's the most obvious transfer link of pre-season, and we're never going to hear the end of it, whether he signs or not. But an interesting tidbit in the Dutch media from Van Dagen's side. Dutch businessman Chris Wirtz, who was a board member of Sunderland.
From who, Gav? Just repeat that, please.
Van Dagen's side.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Was that one not good enough for you?
No, sounds like a town name rather than a name, mate, the way you say it, but I'll take your word for it.
Me Dutch isn't me strong suit, like.
Like Steve McLaren.
Yeah. Long on a blitch, schmuck on a pancake. Dutch businessman Chris Wirtz, who was on the board of Sunderland during Henderson's time at the club, has said definitively that Jordan Henderson will return to the stadium late this summer. Jordan Henderson, Bomber, is he somebody you would like to see in a Sunderland shirt?
100% unequivocally, yes. You know, when I first heard the links, I was like, oh, is it lazy journalism? Because it's the most obvious link to make, bringing Jordan Henderson back to the club when we're back in the Premier League. I think what you've just mentioned gives it a little bit more, well, quite a bit more legs. And I think it would be the perfect start to a summer of what will be a frenetic transfer activity. I wouldn't necessarily expect him to tick all the boxes in terms of playing every week and being exactly what we need to stay in the Premier League. But his influence on and off the pitch, you know, he for all intents and purposes, if he does sign, he probably won't play every week. But he'll play some part every week. But the thing that really excites me is, let's say hypothetically we keep hold of Jobe and Rig and Neil, and all three of them are in and around the squad next season. How influential is he going to be on those three young lads, having, you know, captained England so many times, won the Champions League, won the Premier League? You know, I think it could potentially be that big a signing that it could be the difference between Jobe Bellingham staying or not, to be honest.
Well, I was just about to ask you that, Chris. Do you think if we sign somebody of that profile, it would inspire other young players to stay on? Because, I mean, in terms of other than Jobe's brother, I mean, there's not many better English midfielders to really learn from, look up to, try and emulate than probably Jordan Henderson, really.
There's not, but I don't think Jordan Henderson signing is going to kind of turn heads in terms of players staying with us. I think if they've already decided, I think they're off. I think if they get a better offer, I don't think they'll turn around and go, oh, I've got this offer on the table for $100,000 a week. But Jordan Henderson signed, and he's a canny lad, so I might stay there. I don't think it's going to happen like that. I mean, look, Jordan Henderson, you know, looking at him, he's 35 in June. I think Bomber touched on it there. I think he's that type of player. He's probably the Alan Brown or the Corey Evans of the Premier League. I think that's the kind of role we'll ask him to play. And if you look at this season, when I tweaked our transfer policy a little bit, rather than focusing completely on under 23s, we brought in the likes of Chris Mepp, the likes of Alan Brown. And actually, even though
especially in Alan Brown's case, didn't play a huge amount. Chris Mepham obviously played a lot and was, I think you described him as a Rolls Royce at times, Gav, earlier in the season. But I think behind the scenes, that's where those players are important. And actually, they help those younger players, especially towards the end of the season when pressure was on and people were, giving them pelters for losing games, even though they were fourth in the league. There was probably those old heads behind the scenes saying, we're all right, we're doing brilliant, and they need that. So, and you look at Jordan Henderson, 28 games in the Dutch Eredivisie, or Eredivisie, or however you want to say
that again, Chris. Say that again.
That's already backfired, hasn't it? But 28 games in that top flight over there, over the water. So he's played quite a few games this season for someone who's just about 10-35, and it was only 2 seasons ago where he was coming off the back of the season having played 35 Premier League games for Liverpool. So when people say, has his legs gone and all this sort of stuff, and it's also 28 games this season for a side who finished second in their division. I think they lost out by only a point.
Should have won it. Yeah, should have won
exactly.
it.
So, I mean, he's played at a really good level. I mean, and I don't think we wouldn't sign him, and he'd be the first to admit that he wouldn't be coming in to play 40 games, and he just wouldn't. And I don't think I think if he does want to come back to the Premier League, I think actually a side of our stature just coming in and finishing bottom half is probably where he's going to end up. Now, who better to go to than Sunderland? How many other, there might be, let's say we didn't go up. I do wonder whether he would have been linked with the Leeds and the Burnley and Sheffield United if we hadn't have gone up. So it's a type of profile that fits. So we'll just see what happens. But I agree with Bomber. Good signing if it happens.
Any coincidence, Johnny, that he was in the stands for the game? I know he's a Sunderland fan, but there are people certainly outside the Sunderland bubble seeing that and making the connection and saying, well, it can't be a coincidence he was there to watch the game.
Well, I think it was telling, wasn't it, that he was, I think, the only active player of the ex-Sunderland lot who kind of made it onto the big screen at Wembley at the end of the game and was, really in focus and talked about. It's not like we had Pickford there, twiddling his thumbs in the stands, getting his mug on the big screen. So I think that probably does tell you there's at least something in it. I think a bit like, I'm sure we'll maybe touch on Amad eventually in one of these, maybe even today, but it's one of those where you think the club probably be daft not to at least pick up the phone and say, what are the chances? Do you fancy it? I mean, look, I'll be totally honest. I was really disappointed in him when he moved to Saudi and all that stuff and, the furore that went on around that. But from a footballing point of view, I think it, like the lads have said, it's a bit of a no-brainer, really, isn't it, if it does come off? Because, as they've said, loads of experience, be willing not to play every game. And, that kind of personality around the dressing room, it's only going to augment the atmosphere and the team spirit that's already there, you'd think, unless something catastrophic happens within the first couple of weeks of him turning up and he hates everyone for some reason. Barring something like that, I think it's probably going to be a good thing if he comes in.
There is something just in the back of my mind that is still scarred from the return of Grant Ledbetter, however. And you can't help but I know there's a bit of a difference in the players, but, in terms of like local lad that went away and has come back, so yeah, there's a 1% of me that still bears that scar tissue in the back of my mind, but we've got to go for it.
I mean, also just on a footballing point of view as well, you think obviously the Henderson that was in his prime was box to box. He had loads of legs, could run for days. He was getting up and down the pitch. That's not the Henderson we'll get, obviously, if he comes in. But if we still play like a 4-3-3 with deeper midfielder, as we did for large parts of this season, you'd imagine sitting in that holding role and just screening the back four, he's going to use his head more than his legs, isn't he? Almost to make sure he's in the right positions and stuff. So you would imagine, especially the way that we already sit deep and let other teams have the ball and come on to us, he'd be asked to do something that's way more within his skill set now than his skill set from 10 years ago, if you know what I mean.
We would probably use him in the exact same way in which he's been used for England. So Tuchel's doing exactly the same thing as what probably Lebris will end up doing should he come to the club.
Yeah, I mean, but for a start, Bomber, you've got to leave that League One ship behind, mate. Honestly, you know.
I know, mate. I know. It was quite a jarring time, though, and it wasn't that long ago.
I mean, we'll go. You know, Gav's brilliant piece that he put out on the pod and on the site the other day. I mean, all that hurt. We should just kind of roll it up into a ball and chuck it away. I think use Darren Goff's psychology technique. But the other thing I was going to say was in terms of Henderson, and again going back, but I always remember Dennis Smith talking about when he took over and he went to scout John McPhail and he was watching him and he just saw John McPhail shouting at the other players. And John McPhail was playing in a reserve game for Sheffield United or Bristol City. I can't remember, one of those at the time. But he said, however John McPhail might be playing, I need that. I need someone to just instruct the players on what's happening and where they need to be. And I just need that bit. And there's an element of that. I think that, you know, Jordan Henderson comes in and we've all, you know, there's those clips from the empty stadiums when he was playing for Liverpool during COVID. And that's all you could hear. You could just hear Jordan Henderson's voice above anything else. And actually, I think that might be part of it, just to have that voice on the pitch. And I think, like Johnny said, that's from a deep position. He just keeps everyone else right.
Yeah, well, on top of that as well, he's still making England squads. Do you know what I mean? So he's, you know, he can't be that bad. You know, if he's still making he's in the England squad this summer. So for me, you know, people who are worried about Jordan Henderson's potential fitness and physicality and stuff, if he's good enough to play for England, he's good enough to play for Sunderland, as far as I'm concerned. And you know, he's been the model professional his whole life. You know, he's looked after himself. So sort of in that Milner role, where, you know, James Milner's still to this day, I'm pretty sure, still playing, nearly 40-year-old, you know what I mean? I can imagine Henderson going on and playing that long if he wants to. And it's a deal that makes sense. He's a Sunderland lad. You know, he left before he was anywhere near his prime, really. He was still, you know, when you talk about Jobe and Chris Rigg and players like that potentially leaving, it would be a similar set of circumstances. He have like a year and a half with us and then went to Liverpool and that was that. So I would imagine for him as a player, he probably has unfinished business in his own mind. Like, he'd probably really, really want to do something with Sunderland, or at least help Sunderland stay in the Premier League. So I just think if you just take his career into isolation, I don't think there's a more obvious move. And the only you know, problem that I can potentially see is wages. You know, if he starts demanding too much money, but if he's a Sunderland fan and he wants to come back to Sunderland, I'm sure he'll make some allowances and he'll still be paid handsomely for it. I mean, you mentioned Saudi before. He got plenty of money from that deal, didn't he? So I'm sure he can. I'm sure he can cut a few corners to get back to Sunderland, because I know I would.
We'll just give him vouchers for the stack,
or the bridges or something like that. I think Jackie White, he can get himself back there for his weekly shop. On to the next one, then, I guess Enzo Le Fee. I want to talk about him because, as we all know, permanent signing now, and he's now Sunderland's record signing, £19.3 million, Bomber, for Enzo Le Fee. Value for money, do you think? I mean, these days, that's just buttons, isn't it, for a decent player?
Well, yeah, I think if you think about Premier League signings the last 5 years, how many of clubs brought in, Premier League clubs that brought in for 20 million and have been anywhere near the ability of Enzo Le Fee? Admittedly, he's doing it in the Championship. I mean, I've got no doubts that he'll stand up and bring those levels of performance to Premier League as well, because he's class. But I would struggle to think of anyone that's better value for money, Premier League, Championship, or otherwise. To be perfectly honest, we've been very lucky, the circumstances surrounding it, and that obviously Regis Labrise has come in and knows him, and he was having a bit of a troubled time at Roma because they changed the manager so many times, and Ranieri didn't really fancy him. It feels a bit like daylight robbery, I've got to be honest. And the only surprising thing is that, given all the money that we burnt through and threw away in the 2000s, is that he's actually a record signing.
Well, that's it. I know. But still though, I mean, Enzo Le Fee, quality footballer, Chris. Somebody who I think all the teams coming up would want. And I imagine a lot of teams in the Premier League will have been impressed with him. And I still don't think we've seen the best of him, because he's been injured for quite a chunk of the season, hasn't he? But we saw in moments in the playoffs, didn't we? That in the build up of the playoffs, that just that quality that it's top class quality, really, isn't it? You know, that weight of pass, that ability to just find somebody in space, the way he turns on the ball sometimes. You can tell Enzo Le Fee is not a Championship footballer, and I'm actually really excited to see him in an environment that probably suits him a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, talking about environment, I mean, there was a lot of words said about ambition about us last season, about our ownership. And as Bomber said, I mean, I think it was, dare we say, Didier Ndong, I think, had been our record transfer for far too long. And people talking about ambition and breaking that transfer record. In theory, actually, we broke that transfer record before we actually got promoted or to get promoted. So people were going, oh, there's no ambition, we're not bringing the players in. I mean, bloody hell, they almost doubled the the kind of transfer record before we even got promoted.
What more do you want?
Exactly, and the interesting thing is, again, we're talking about players coming into their prime. He's just turned 25 in February, and he's a player that's coming into his prime, but I think he's yet to find his role. A bit, I mean, in different circumstances, but a bit like Jobe when he first came to the club.
Yeah,
he was still trying to find his role. I think Enzo Le Fee is trying to find what player he actually is. And I hadn't actually thought about it, but it was interesting. Clive Tilsley, from an outsider point of view, because we've always thought number 10, or he's been forced out the left hand side. But Clive Tilsley said he was a different player when we changed things up, and he was dropped a bit deeper. He put his foot in. He got his foot on the ball. He started all of those moves that cut through Sheffield United when we hadn't played through the lines once until Le Fee dropped deeper, and then he got the ball and played it quickly forward. And it's going to be interesting to see that if that's actually his role moving forward, because I can actually see him being a central midfielder, not necessarily a number 10, not a wide player. I think he's got everything to be a really good central midfielder. So it's going to be interesting to see where we play him, or whether Labrie has just got that idea that he is a number 10. But when it just seemed to, it was almost a bit like Jobe when the game's in front of him. You thought, bloody hell, actually, I mean, we've always knew he's got a brilliant touch and he's a fantastic player. But I just think he looked more effective when he dropped a bit deeper.
Step in the right direction, Johnny. Do you think, this signing?
Oh, it has to be, doesn't it? I mean, we were talking in the chat last night about whether we should sign Chris Mepham or not, and I think similar logic applies here to there, which is if you were offered the chance to sign a player who you already know has come to your club, performed well, likes the environment, knows the team, good relationship with the manager, for a relatively low fee, as Bomber said, obviously it's our record signing, but I think most clubs in the Prem, you're talking about 40, 50 million plus before you move the needle on their record signings now. So that kind of player becomes available who you know for a fact is going to fit in and perform. Everyone would rip your hands off to have that guaranteed about every signing we ever make. So the fact that we've got this lad, obviously, confirmed as soon as we got promoted, that's a massive, massive coup for the club, I think. And it's a brilliant bit of business planning, as well as Chris was talking about. The fact that they've had all this organising in place since we were in the Championship, I think speaks volumes to how capable they are of getting these kind of deals done, which I think just bodes really well for the rest of the window as well. And anyone who's expecting us to play with any recognised number 10 next season, whether it's Le Fee or anybody else, I imagine is going to be quite disappointed, because I think if we rock up and try and only leave two back and have a number 10 up with two wingers and a forward, we'll get 10-0'd every week. Never mind playing with a 10. So it's a good job Le Fee looks good at playing further back, because I think he's going to have to do that quite a lot this season.
And it would be nice if we could pair him up with somebody else who Sunderland fans enjoyed when they were on loan. Amad, as someone Johnny mentioned earlier, that's not going away, and I'm sure it won't throughout the summer, no matter how tenuous it might seem, because it's a really weird situation with Amad, because he is quite clearly one of Man United's best players, and we're talking about signing him. It shows how much of a shit show they are, really. If it wasn't for the fact the three promoted teams were so bad, Man U and Spurs would have been in real trouble this year. But Amad's one of the best players in that team. However, with this new manager clearly being the front man for the project that the new ownership at Manchester United, or new part ownership in Jim Radcliffe, want, Ruben Amorim's going to get, the chance to completely rebuild his squad over the summer. And that's going to mean they're going to have to raise money, because they didn't get Champions League football. They didn't get any European football. So somehow you've got to raise money to be able to spend money, right? And Amad, to me, is one of the players you look at and go, well, we could make a bit of money on him. He doesn't really fit that system, because, as everybody knows, Amorim likes to play that 3-4-3 system. And I think Amad at times has actually had to play as a bit of a wing back in that system, which hasn't really suited him. But still, I mean, he scored on the final day of the season, the twat, sending Newcastle to the Champions League with his head and then winning a penalty. But yeah, that rumour's not going anywhere. And I think it's probably Bomber because, I mean, one, obviously Amad's absolutely loved by Sunderland, but he also has even recently said he loves Sunderland, and he was pictured at the semi-final. He was on the pitch with the litany of other former Sunderland players as they did the Guard of Honour for Jimmy Montgomery. There's something, I think there is something still there with Amad, and I don't think it's as fanciful as some may actually think. I think there's a chance if we can come up with the money for him, and I don't think he'd cost ridiculous money in Premier League terms. I do think there's a chance Amad would come back, and that he's been linked by a website 222foot.com, which I believe are an Ivorian website with links to the national team. Apparently they've whilst that might not seem the most obvious source, they do have some sort of link to the Ivorian national team, and Amad has been linked with them to Sunderland. I mean, do you think there's a chance of this one, or is it like that Dumb and Dumber scene where you're telling me there's a chance? There's only a slim chance. What do you think?
I think there is a slim chance. If we're frank, I think we're letting our hearts possibly rule our heads with that one a little bit. I mean, I would love nothing more than for it to happen. And like you've mentioned, Gav, Amad clearly loves the football club. The football club clearly loves him. It would be a match made in heaven. There's about 4 or 5 stars that would have to all align for it to happen. But some of those don't look so unrealistic as they might have at the start of the last season. For all intents and purposes, every single Manchester United player up for sale and prepared to listen to offers to. The figure I heard was 40 million is the number for Amad. He's obviously just had that trouble with the fans, that he was photographed sticking his finger up at some of the fans, albeit it sounds like they were offering him some pretty rancid abuse about his family. So thoroughly deserved. But there is that seems to be that little bit of friction there. Also, interestingly, it's quite public that Ruben Amorim has no love left for Garnacho, and Amad seems to have put himself close with Garnacho in terms of like their friendship and how they got on. There was an interview with just after the Man United friendly where one of the journalists asked Amad if he'd hoped that Garnacho can find a way to stay at the club because they're very close, etc., etc. And Ruben Amorim was pictured basically laughing behind the scenes at that potential question. So, by association, he might have fallen out of favour a little bit with Amorim. Also, you've got the like you mentioned, Gav, the formation. Amorim plays with wing backs, and Amad, whilst probably capable, has probably got no intention of wanting to play as a right wing back. So yeah, there's 3 or 4 things that point to it could possibly happen, but then you've got this overarching thing which kind of tramples down all of that by saying he is one of Manchester United's best players, if not their very best player at the moment, aside from maybe Bruno. So yeah, it may be our hearts ruling our heads. I would love nothing more for it to happen, and I'll keep hoping until the 31st of August or whenever it is the transfer window closes. I'll keep hoping and praying for it. Yeah, it'd be a dream.
Yeah, what do you reckon, Chris? You're generally more. I get a bit excited, but you're normally a bit more realistic. What do you think?
Well, I would say delusional sometimes more than excited. But
hey, I told you we'd get promoted. Don't better be forgetting.
You've been saying that for about 10 years, though, mate. Yeah, look, I think Bomber's kind of got it right there in terms of that being a slim chance, and I think mainly because and I think it goes in our favour, the fact that Amad is one of Manchester United's better players, actually, because I do think Amorim doesn't think he fits into his system. I think like Bomber touched on, but that might mean, because in the current climate and what happened at the end of the season and all the talk with the interview with Ratcliffe and Neville, how much Manchester United might actually need to get players out to get players in. And Amad being one of the better players, as Bomber said, if they get 40 million for someone who doesn't fit into their system, I think actually it's a bit of a win for Man United. Then they can go out and buy the type of player he wants on that side. The other thing as well, just in terms of buying him, fantastic player. And I think he was absolutely fantastic for us. Did play in the Championship, but he has gone on to kind of proven how important he is to Man United in the Premier League. It was a different system and a different style of play in terms of having Mowbray and having that freedom and allowing Roberts and Amad to basically float and play 1-2s and things like that. Now, I'd like to think a player like Amad you accommodate into a system like this, because it is kind of similar in that Le Fee likes to play triangles, which is similar in some respects to Mowbray, but it's a lot more structured than we used to play. So I would like to think he would fit in somehow. But it's almost this eternal battle that Amad's got that a lot of players have, that he knows. I think he knows if you ask him, if somebody asks him outright without any cameras around and said, will you enjoy next season more if you're at Sunderland or you're at Manchester United? I don't think he'd even take a second. He'd go, I'd enjoy it more if I was at Sunderland. Simple as that. But it's ambition and money. Let's face it, he's going to get a lot more money at Manchester United, and it's playing for Manchester United. So if you think I leave Manchester United for Sunderland, why would you do that? What, because you enjoy it day to day? Yep. And some players go for that. Or some players just go, well, no, I'm at Manchester United and my ambition as a player is to play at the top level, and it's more likely with Manchester United. So I'm sure a lot of players have got that similar battle where they go, well, I'd prefer it further down the leagues, maybe at a different club or whatever. But as an ambitious player, you want to play at the top level.
It's a weird one, Johnny, isn't it? Because as I said when I first mentioned this, it's in the words of Gary Neville, it's Manchester United. You know, it is like, you know.
Stop name dropping me, boss, will you?
That was a great Dutch accent you did there, go.
Yeah. You know, but it is like, it's Man U, but do Man U have the same allure as they used to have? I watched that video of them. They went to Kuala Lumpur to play a friendly after the season, got beat 1-0 by a league select 11 of absolute nobodies, and they'd done like a parade where there would have been like hundreds of thousands of people lying in the streets at once upon a time, and there was just nobody. It was just sad. It's like, this isn't the same Man United that it once was. And I just wonder, like with Amad, he's been there 4 years. He got shipped out of Rangers. It didn't work. Came to Sunderland. He said it was the most he's ever enjoyed football when he was a Sunderland player. Went back to Man U. Has had to really fight to get into that team. You know, it wasn't like he went back and was straight in there. He got a few tidbits of appearances here and there, and then took his chances in big games and in big moments and things. And then there's another manager came in who wants to play a system that doesn't really suit him and things. But the bit that sort of hangs over my head is if he's available, there are going to be better and bigger place clubs in Sunderland who would take him off Man U. So it's whether a 22-year-old, isn't it, he wants to go with the sentimental move and leave to join a Sunderland team who are ambitious. And I would say we do match his ambition in terms of the way where we want to go. But really, let's be frank about it. Amad could probably get into most teams in Europe, or at least in the squad. So it's a tough one, isn't it? I am really interested to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I mean, two things. One, like you were saying before, it is just mental that we're sat here talking about trying to sign one of Man United's best players on a permanent transfer for 40 million.
Straight after winning the playoffs.
What a couple of weeks this has been, eh? Like, that's insane. I mean, you're right as well. It was proper tin pot, that bus parade thing they did in Malaysia. I mean, that was embarrassing, which shows how far they've fallen and why we're able to talk about this. But I think you're spot on as well, the last bit you said. I think the problem isn't getting Amad out of Man United. I think the problem is, if he goes, he will have options higher up the football and food chain than Sunderland at this present moment where we are, obviously newly promoted. It'll be a relegation scrap. We all know that. There will be teams, look, whether it would be teams in England would be in the sort of Champions League, Europa League would be after him, or whether it would be teams across the continent, there would be teams in continental competition who would be improved by having Amad Diallo in the team. Like, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
And if the price is 40 million, again, it means we could think about buying them because we could probably just about afford that. But again, there'll be a lot of teams who can justify 40 million for a player as good as Amad. So I wouldn't have any concerns about whether he'd fancy it or whether he'd want to come, because as the lads have said, I'm sure if you asked him, would you fancy a season at Sunderland again? He'd go, yep, absolutely I would. But yeah, I just think that It's one of those, I almost think, in that similar vein of people who thought it would be a season too soon for us to go up, it might just be that this situation for Amad is a season too soon. If it was next year and we'd stayed up and we were looking to then build and try and push on, I think that becomes a much different proposition, maybe one that's way more likely to happen. But I think the fact that it is likely we'll go back down, as much as we don't want to admit it, but it is, I think that could be the thing that maybe, puts paid to it. But we can all, hope that it's a sort of Wilfred Zaha Palace situation where he goes to Man United, it doesn't quite work out, comes back and stays at Palace for, 8, 9, 10 years or whatever. I'd love that to happen with Amad.
So what you're suggesting then, Johnny, is that we actually try and sign him for the 26-27 season when we've qualified for the Champions League?
Yeah, well, that'll do. And we'll probably get him even more cut price then, because Man United will have gone down.
And the other thing Johnny's saying is, I think he's saying we're signing the Chopras of the world this summer, and it's going to be the Malbrancs of the summer after.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, Chopras in the general sense, not somebody like Michael Chopra. But yeah, I think that's succinct.
Did you see Michael Chopra's tweet, by the way, after we got promoted? Easy 6 points. Oh, stupid mag twat, isn't he?
He wants shooting into space in, man.
Anyways, we're going to have to deal with all that at some point. Anyways, there was one other little tenuous transfer link, which we'll not discuss too much, but Club America's Mexican goalkeeper Luis Malagon has been linked. Also interest from PSV Eindhoven and Crystal Palace, according to Nation Football. Not someone I've ever heard of, so we'll not go into that too much, but one to certainly keep an eye on. Outs, before we go on to the most obvious one, Nectar Triantis, Hibs apparently want to sign him on a permanent basis, Bomber. Would you be open to that? I mean, are a Scottish Premier League club going to pay what we think he's worth? Does Nectar Triantis really want to go back to Hibs? I would like to see him at least get a pre-season with us. I think he's earned that opportunity.
I think he deserves
to get a pre-season.
I think he deserves a shot. Yeah, I mean, like you just suggested, the amount of money that Hibs are going to be able to afford to pay for him, whilst any amount of money in for us could be reinvested. We're not talking like it's not going to be the difference between us being able to sign Amad, for example, or not. It's going to be, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively small amount. So then you balance that up. So do we want that handful of £1 million in, or actually do we want to give him a chance? Because if we're being frank, he's quite clearly shone in the albeit in the Scottish Premier League. He's shone in that division. He's very highly rated in that division. Why not bring him back and give him a chance, even if it's the first half of the season, and then, if it doesn't quite work out, loan him out back to Hibs in January and go, okay, loan him with an obligation to buy for $5 million at the end of the season if you want him. I definitely think he deserves a chance, and I think the club would be silly to not give him a chance based on his performances last season, and like I say, how highly rated he is up in Scotland at the minute.
Any thoughts on Nectar Triantis, Chris, on potentially keeping him?
Yeah, well, I'm a bit like Bomber. I kind of want to see him given his chance, but at the same time, I was just looking, and he's just turned 22 in May. He's going to want to play, and he's had 2 seasons now at Hibs. The first one, a season and a half, and yeah, I mean, he's nominated for Scottish Football Writers Footballer of the Year as well, and his stock has gone up. And it's one of these signings. I mean, we're looking, something like $250,000 we signed him for. A couple of years ago, and now I think Bomber touched on it. With his reputation now at Hibs, if we're selling him on, we're selling him on for at the very least 10 times that, if not 20 times that, which is absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? In a couple of years, but he's got. I mean, you wouldn't be surprised if the Celtic and the Rangers of the world were certainly after him, because he's proven himself in that Scottish Premier League. Me and I can't remember who it was talked on a previous pod about Triantis, and I did mention the Scottish Premier League and said some words about that, and I'm not going to say that again just in case. But it has got a reputation. But it is a massive step up to the Premier League, and it's a really double-edged sword, because he's not going to come and be happy sitting on the bench. It's as simple as that, even if it's for a Premier League club. And I'm sure his wages have shot up, because I think they'll have all had clauses in their contract that saw them increased by whatever it is, 20% or something like that. So he'll be on much better wages now with us. So whether he's happy or not to wait for his chance and think, and have confidence in himself to say, when I do get a chance, I'm going to get that chance. And it ties in with the whole Jordan Henderson conversation, because now they've got a decision to say, we're talking about Jordan Henderson in that holding midfield role. And we can say, well, we've got a 22-year-old who's coming through, who's got a great opportunity to kick on. And he's coming off the back of a brilliant season at Hibs. Do we then bring Jordan Henderson in, who's going to probably take the position of Triantis, where he might play 15, 20 games at most next season? So it's this decision now. How do you have faith in those younger players who you want to develop? And we've brought Triantis in to do that. Or was the model to bring Triantis in to do well for a couple of years and sell him on for 20 times the price that we bought him for? And actually, I think this transfer or non-transfer might tell you a lot about how we think about things. Because whether we bring the 35-year-old in, or whether we say, no, we've got a 22-year-old, we don't need that 35-year-old on what, maybe 60 grand a week or whatever it is. So it's going to be really interesting. And you know, I honestly think if you give me the choice, I'd rather us put our cards on Triantis and say, yep, you've got a chance. You're in the squad. You might get 10 games. You might wait for an injury or something like that, a bit like Henderson, and go with the younger lads.
I don't know about you, Johnny, but I think this whole conversation is completely different before and after promotion. Like if we stay in the Championship, I think we're sat here going, Nectar Triantis is going to be part of that squad. But in the Premier League, is that really where you give somebody a chance? You know what I mean? Like we've already got young players who've played 40, 50 games last season, and we probably need to add a layer of experience right through the squad, not just in the midfield. And that's possibly going to push his nose out of joint. And as Chris said before, Triantis is going to want to play games. He's went out on loan in the last 2 seasons and played football. He's going to want to prove himself at a higher level in the Scottish Premiership. I think it's fanciful for Hibs to think that he would probably go back there. I don't think they'll be able to afford him. And I also think if he's got any ambition, which I imagine he has, he's going to, want to come in pre-season and show what he can do for Sunderland. And if that doesn't work by the end of August, I think he's going to want to be getting himself a move somewhere where he's playing at a better level in Scotland. And I don't know if anybody's seen as well, by the way, apparently he's declared for Greece. So he made the last Australia squad, but he's actually declared his intention to play for Greece, which I think internationally probably gives him a better chance of getting a move somewhere. I think there's more prestige around playing in European international football than there is going halfway across the world and playing for Australia.
Well, not just that, but don't they go missing for a chunk of the season every so often for a tournament?
Yeah, well, there's
the
the Asian Cup and things like that, isn't there? So yeah, John, I don't know what just quickly on Triantis before we move on. I mean, do you think he's got a chance of kicking around here?
I think he's got a slim chance, a bit like we were saying about the Amad signing. I think, there is a world in which Triantis has a good pre-season, makes an impact, and then has a proper place in the squad going forward. And, I hope for his sake that he takes it. But I think you're right to say that it's a very different conversation before and after promotion as well. And to be honest, I think fans are a little bit blindsided by the fact that we've gone up when talking about this, because we all associate Triantis in our heads with being part of a Championship team going into Premier League, right? But he's never really played for Sunderland in any meaningful sense. He's had the odd game or two. If we, again, not to sound like a broken record, if we were signing somebody on a free who knows the club, likes everyone, and was the Scottish Premier League Player of the Season last year at 22 years old, we'd all be going on like, Speakman is a genius. He's one of the best operators in world football. But because he was at Sunlun when we were in the Championship, I think there's that association in people's minds that, well, it's a big step up for him. But, like if we'd loaned him out from the Premier League last season to the Scottish Premier League and he got Player of the Season, thousands of fans would be saying, well, he needs a chance when he comes back. Like, he's proven himself. What more can he do? So I do think, he's been a little bit hard done to in that sense in terms of people's perceptions of him. But I do still agree that, it is slim chance for him, slim hope to actually make a proper name for himself this season. Mm-hmm. But I certainly won't be disappointed if he is here come the end of the transfer window, because I'm sure he'll be a good option.
Yeah. And then on to another midfielder, Jobe Bellingham, somebody who features on all of these news pods, although it seems like things are starting to actually happen now with him. I think there was one moment after the game where it felt like he was saying goodbye. He was blowing kisses to everybody and waving. And I think in some of his interviews, it kind of felt as though he was saying, like, I've done my job here. Then he put a post on Instagram, which was, he'd reshared a post about his contract that he signed last summer with a glass of wine and said, job done. And then he was pictured arriving in Frankfurt airport with his family, obviously heading off to talk to Eintracht Frankfurt. And it's been The Athletic today that on Monday he did indeed travel to Frankfurt with his parents to visit officials from Eintracht Frankfurt, including head coach Dino Topmöller and sporting director Markus Krösche. That's his second visit, having visited them a few weeks before. And there's also a long-standing interest from Borussia Dortmund, and apparently their sporting director Hans-Joachim Owatzer, how'd you like me German there, Chris?
That's easy for you to say.
Yeah, flew to England on Sunday to meet the Bellingham family in person. So, I mean, the vultures are circling already. They haven't even waited till the carcass is cold. They're going right in for the kill. Obviously, Dortmund, as I say, arriving in Germany, then him flying out to meet with the Frankfurt officials. And also, apparently, RB Leipzig are interested, but the issue they've got is they don't have Champions League football, whereas the other two do. The Athletic also reporting he's valued at around 25 million by the club, and that the club are still hopeful of keeping him, and that's our desire. I think that was also reported in Team Talk on Thursday. And he spent the last week in Ibiza with his brother and Wayne Lineker, seemingly from the photos I saw, partying at Ocean Beach before he heads off to join up with England under-21s for the European Championships, which take part in Slovakia over the summer. So, Jobe, a weird situation, Bomber, isn't it? Because I think most of us have resigned ourselves to losing him, but it appears, for all intents and purposes, that Sunderland actually do want to keep him, and that there's going to be a bit of a fight on over the summer, I think, but not just between Sunderland and the player, but with the buying clubs. Is this just Sunderland showing their arm and saying, if you really do want him, you're going to have to battle for him? We're not just going to go, there you go, you can have Jobe, you can have him. You know, we've already agreed to this. Is it that? Or is it? Do you think the club genuinely do want him and they don't want that 25, 30 million quid that would come had we sold him?
I think the club genuinely want to keep hold of him. He's been front and centre of anything social media wise that the club have put out, almost like, trying to endear himself even more into the club. I think there will be a point where the money that's on offer will be too good to turn down. My personal opinion actually is that 25 million is far too low for a player with the potential he's got. And you see what other top championship players are going around for. 25 million is to be honest, quite ridiculous, depending on what add-ons and sell-on percentages and that there are. But I think the club
cut into there, Bomber. But when you look at what Spurs paid for Archie Gray, that's the one I keep coming back to.
That's my yardstick. Well,
yeah, 25 million for the potential. Well, it's not so much potential anymore because he is delivering. I'd be talking kind of in the 40s again. I know at least to consider it, but I think the club want to keep hold of him. I do echo your thoughts, Gav, and I'm sure the same as Johnny and Chris as well, in that there did feel like something of a coming to an end in his post final kind of reactions and stuff, and pointing to the badge and saying we're Premier League, and there was a lot around that kind of job done post. But then, like I say, the club are doing everything they can to make him front and centre of all of their social media engagement at the minute. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion by any stretch of the imagination. It'll just depend on whether or not the German clubs get into a bit of a bidding war and somebody offers us mid-30s to 40s for him. And I think then the club's hands are tied a little bit.
Do you reckon, Chris, with all of this seemingly happened quite quick, but then he's away on holiday, he's then got to concentrate on the England under-21s in the European Championships. Do you think we're more likely to see this settled sooner rather than later, or do you think it'll drag on a bit? Like as Bomber says, we might end up with a bit of a bidding war. I think that would probably suit the club more, wouldn't it, if it went on a little bit longer than just the next couple of weeks?
Aye, well, he's got to have some Alka-Seltzer first and sober up, and then once he does that, he can start thinking about what's next. But I think Bomber touched on it as well. You've got to remember how young he is. That he signed for us when he was 17. I mean, I don't know. I can't even remember what I was doing at 17, and I think that's part of the problem. But
I think we've got an idea.
Out in the street and
thanks, cheers, Bomber. Yeah, thanks for the confidence you put in there. But he turned 18 in that first September that he played for us. In his first year, he played 45 League games, and in his second year he played 40. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. And he spent that first year finding himself. And then once he did, he's this year he's found himself as that kind of deep lying midfielder who breaks things up and gets moves going. And I think his reputation's just gone through the roof because everyone knew he was a good player. He just had to find out what type of player he was. And you know, you talk about the money. My worry is, and it's not really a concern, but it's potentially the way the club is and how they talk to players. Because if you think he was brought in for, let's say, around $2.5 million, I mean, I know it was undisclosed, but let's say it was about that with add-ons, and then you're talking about 25 million, I mean, that's 10 times your money in 2 years. Now, I agree with you all that that's low, but the conversations to bring him to the club and to get him into the club would have revolved around, we know your path. And he would have, him and his representatives would have said, this is his pathway for the next 3, 4, 5 years, and we've got it mapped out. And and Sunderland is going to help us do that. Now, what that might mean is Sunderland, because we want an our reputation, and Speakman wants this, where players respect us across the game, and they know how we're run as a club, that we don't shaft players. Look at the Corey Evans thing. He was kept on when he was injured, and we looked after him, and we look after players. And if we need to attract young players, we need to show that not only we can develop them inside the club, but when it's the right time to move on, we don't shaft them and we don't force them to stay because we want 50, 60 million. And I agree that the club needs to get the right deal out of this, and they'll try their best. But the conversations to bring him would have been, right, when the time is right and you feel the time is right, we will let you leave for X amount, or, you know, at least 10 times what we brought you in for, or something along that line. And it's based on how many games you play. And that would have been in his contract as well, especially that first season when people were saying bring him out, and we were almost crowbarring him into the team by playing him up front at times. And he was trying to just play minutes to find out what type of player he was. And it was because of the minutes he had on the pitch that he's become the player he has. So yes, I agree with you all. I want 40 million, 50 million for him or whatever. But I just think these are the conversations, and this was agreed from the very beginning on how this was going to go with Jobe.
Yeah, just very quickly, because I know we need to round up soon. International duty, I mentioned before, Jobe being in the England under-21s, he was named the preliminary squad. So was Dennis Serkin, so he could also be playing in the Euros over the summer. Elijah Mayenda's been moved up from the under-20s to the 21s, so he's been named in their squad, so he'll also be playing in that tournament. Milan Alexic is away on international duty, but they didn't qualify. Chris Rigg, Tommy Watson, Matt Young, all named in the England under-19 squad for their European Championships in Romania. We've got Salis playing for Ghana. I think he played the other day and apparently was shite. I'm not surprised there. He's probably still pissed. Nectar Triantis is in... Sorry, I think the club have got this wrong, because apparently he's hoping to be in the Australia squad. But as I said before, by all accounts, he's been declared for Greece. So we'll see. Chris Mepham in the Wales squad for their World Cup qualifiers. Likewise, Trey Hume and Dan Ballard for Northern Ireland. So lots of Sunderland players in international action over the coming weeks, and I'm sure they'll be hoping to squeeze a holiday in somewhere before they come back for pre-season. Very quickly then, before we go, the new away shirt, Johnny. Now, this is one which I think has went around the socials for 2 or 3 days now. Club have been filming adverts and taking photos for the photo shoot for the launch of the new Sunderland away kit. And they were caught out because people down the beach with camera phones decided to take pictures of them getting pictures taken. And we saw very clear images of what the new away kit's going to look like. It's a blue number, similar to the kit which we wore in the late 80s and early 90s. Famously, Marco Gabbiadini scoring against Newcastle in the playoff semis at St James's Park wearing that strip. Very similar to that. It features the old ship badge with the blue top, which we haven't had yet, which is my favourite Sunderland badge. So I'm obviously definitely going to be buying it. It's got a new front of shirt sponsor too, W88, a Chinese gambling firm who've also been on the front of Wolves, Crystal Palace, Aston Villa and Burnley in recent seasons, I think. And this strip, apparently, on the detail has picture. Back in the day, you might remember the one in the late 80s and early 90s. That one had just Hummel written all the way through the blue on the shirt. Well, this one's apparently got patches which are of Roker Lighthouse, which is pretty cool, and I'm interested to see that a little bit more closely. What do you think of that strip? Is it one you'll be buying?
It's an absolute beauty, and I will be buying it the second it's on sale, if not sooner. I can't wait. And I had a retro version of that original kit that I wore the last time we were at Wembley, and I must have lost it in a move or something, moving flats or whatever, but I've lost it. So it's perfect timing for me for them to bring this out, because I can just replace it immediately with the newer flasher model, like a middle-aged dad going through a divorce. And and just on the international duty quickly as well, I bet you Chris Metten gives Kiefer Moore a wry smile or two on Wales duty when they meet up together. I'm sure that won't be frosty at all. But the kit looks absolutely gorgeous. I can't wait for it to come out. Assuming that definitely is the real one, which looks like it is. Yeah, I can't wait.
Providing they do one in Giant, Bomber, will you be buying one?
Yeah, as long as it's got a few X's before the large, mate. Yeah, I'll be. I've never really been a massive kit buyer since I was since I became 18. Basically, I was like, in my head, I was like, kits are for kids. But I've gone back and I've bought the one we played in at Wembley last week, and I will 100%, same as Johnny, be buying this one. I think experiencing Wembley, I'm going to sound a bit sad now, but I think experiencing Wembley is just kind of like even further and even deeper ingratiated myself into the club to want to buy these things. So I was compelled to buy the white kit we played in at Wembley last week, because, you know, it's now a piece of nostalgia, it's a piece of history in the club. And yeah, I'll be buying this one. I've dropped about £120, mate, in terms of cup final memorabilia and Clive Tildes' commentary notes and bits of artwork and the shirt and everything else. So yeah, I'm fully ingratiated in giving the club as much of my money as I can at the moment. So I'll be buying that one.
What about you, Chris? You don't seem like a man who buys Sunlun kits. Will you be getting them for the Benzo?
I don't know whether to take that as a compliment or not. I'm gonna ponder that one, Gav, and think on that. But I'm like Bomber. I've not been one for kits since I was young, and used to love them. Used to get home away third keeper's strip. I mean, I think I've still got Tony Norman's green one somewhere in a box. But I had them all when I was young, but never really been one for them when I've been older. But I just it's funny because I mean, there actually was a lot of talking about the chat that sometimes a nice kit actually produces a good season. It's really strange. But you look at the one that we had, the championship relegation, and God, that was an awful strip. And then we went down, and then we had, you know, stickers over strips and all this sort of stuff. And actually, when it feels tin pot like that, you almost get this feeling like the season's going to be tin pot. But when we have really good strips, it almost kind of gives everyone a bit of a boost. So the way it looks really nice, and anything, you know, that resembles that Gates and Gabardini strip is good for me. I like a nice royal blue away strip. I think it looks good on us. The home one, if it's true, haven't seen that. I'm a little bit meh on that one. I hope that's not quite the design, but we'll see. But I think the important thing, because my lad's birthday is in August, and in previous years, I haven't been able to get him anything like from the club shop. Like literally, the club shop's been completely empty. So from my point of view, it shows that the club are getting on it early. And we've got Father's Day as well around the corner, which we've talked about in previous years. Yeah. That people have looked for presents for Father's Day, nothing. The kits haven't been available or anything like that. So if the club are on it in that way and while the mood's this good, and like Bomber's just said, people want to get on and they want to spend a fortune, so let them. And like it's almost the first season for years that the club shops had stuff in where you can actually we've been begging them for years, saying I want to give you my money, but they haven't been forthcoming in providing us with stuff to spend it on. So I mean, I think that's the important thing, that the club are getting their act together in that sense.
Any strong feelings, Bomber, on the shirt sponsor? Is that something you care about particularly?
The sponsor, no. I never have like ethical considerations about sponsors or anything like that. But it's about how the logo looks on the shirt, and actually it being kind of a one-tonal shirt with a reasonably good logo. I don't mind it at all. I think actually on the blue one in particular, I think it kind of complements the shirt in terms of how it looks. I've got the same opinion of Chris on the home one. Not as fussed on it. Obviously, it's big rumours at the minute and kind of leaks and anti-leaks and everything else. But yeah, on the blue shirt with everything else, it looks really smart in white. Yeah,
the home one reminds me of an old Brentford kit.
Yeah,
I'm not keen on it.
I think Stoke have released a very similar home kit. It hasn't gone down well. just to clarify, if people aren't sure what we're talking about, we released an image. We were passed, obviously not without revealing sources and all that sort of thing. We were passed an image of a supposed potential Sunderland home shirt, and you can find that on our website if you haven't seen it already. But then we've had a bunch of messages from other Sunderland fans since who've poo-pooed it and said, it's not like that. I've been told it looks like the Patrick one from the 1980s, which had the centralised logo. I guess we'll see. You know, it's good. I don't think it's going to be long. The club, if they've got any sense, and I think David Bruce has a lot of sense, particularly in this regard, I think they're going to try and capitalise on the good feeling coming out of Wembley and promotion and all that sort of thing. And if they can, they're going to try and push to get the kit launch done a little bit sooner. There should be, because, I mean, this Hummel kit deal's absolutely printing money, isn't it? Not just the first, second and third strip. And we haven't, that's the other rumour that's going around, is apparently the third strip is the best one we've done yet under Hummel. But, you know, they're all just rumours. And I like all this daft stuff. It's something to get excited about. I actually think the kits last year had a big part to play in how well we started. It sounds stupid, but I think it had a big part to play in how well we started the season, because everybody was like, after years of having crap kit deals, we had a really good one and everyone was proud of it and it all looked smart. And it was like, it was all the sort of thing you would wear out and about. If you were out for a pint, you know, it was trendy, like smart looking gear. And everything since, the time capsules they've done, the training wear, the jackets and all the rest of it that they've done with Hummel, all of it has gone down an absolute treat. So, I mean, if we can just get more of the same, that would be happy days for me. And it's, you know, as long as we look smart when we first turn out in the Premier League next season, happy days, right? I mean, yeah, I'm like you, Bomber. By the way, I'm not someone who gets too tied up in shirt sponsors. Although I do understand people who do, particularly around gambling, because obviously it's very contentious. And from an ethical perspective, you know, do you really want gambling advertisement in football the same way that, you know, alcohol's been banned to a degree, although with the advent of 0% lager, it seems to be everywhere again. But, you know, I get it. I get why people maybe wouldn't want a betting sponsor. And apparently from next season, it's going to be banned from the Premier League, so nobody will have a betting sponsor from next year. So, you know, from the club's perspective, they're just trying to make as much money as they possibly can. And unfortunately, the way to make the most money possible is through gambling sponsorship, isn't it? So it is what it is in that degree. I'm like you, though. I think that's it. And I'm a bit like you. I think as long as it looks nice on the front, then I'm happy enough with it. It is what it is. So let's see. We've got another couple of kits to come out over the summer. It should be interesting. And yeah, as long as we look smart, that's all anyone really cares about. One other little tidbit, which again we don't need to discuss, but I thought I'd bring up: David Myers took the Cork City job. And that was interesting because we ran a piece on the website celebrating his birthday, David Myers' birthday. Somebody who played for Sunderland many years ago now. He's just taken his first steps into management on his birthday and taking the Cork City job. So he gets our best wishes. Good luck to David. Hopefully he can send a few future stars our way, you know, the next Niall Quinn and all the rest of it from the League of Ireland. We'll be happy with that. So yeah, keep them coming, David. Anyways, that leaves us just to wrap up, I think. Johnny's already gone because he's probably off to record another podcast somewhere and ditched us. But I will say goodbye to you, Bomber. Well done, mate. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. Pleasure as always.
Yes, and thank you, Chris. We're going to be back, mate, with plenty, aren't we? We've got loads coming up over the coming weeks.
Loads and loads, because we want to just keep talking about this season, don't we?
Yeah, that's it. We are planning to dive into start season review type stuff and end of season awards and all the rest of it next week. We've done the guesty stuff. We might bring a few guests in between and that, but we aren't going anywhere. There'll be news updates, other fun bits and pieces over the summer to try and keep your taste buds titillated and all the rest of it, because I don't know about anyone else, I just can't get enough of Sunderland at the minute. So we will be back every single day with a pod. So make sure you tune in to Roker Report. How are the podcasts? Go over to our website, social media feeds, all the rest of it. We are everywhere. Anyways, thank you very much, listeners. We'll be back tomorrow with another pod. We'll see you then.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.